Morning, everyone. We're going to convene the March 24th special board meeting regarding solid waste rates. And before we do a roll call, the board needs to approve Director Wilshire participating via Zoom. And can I have a motion to that effect?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Good morning, Director Wilshire.
Sorry.
Good morning, President Schaefer.
All right, public comments?
A roll call?
Yeah, I'll add that. Darn, I knew I'd forget something. Roll call, Madam Clerk, please.
Thank you. Director Cheyenne Wright,
Here.
Director Nicole Wiltshire,
Here.
Chair Arthur Perry,
Here.
Vice President Robert Wooten,
Here.
President Michael Schaefer.
Here, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Public comments. This is the time for anyone in the public wishing to make comments. Anybody online or any other?
We had one that was presented to us about,
We did receive one written public comment that was included with your agenda packet.
should we explain that to?
I did not. I only have one sheet.
It's a lady, I'm assuming Costa Mesa, she's shocked. She wants to oppose any change to the current plan.
But that's public comment for the item, not for.
Oh, is that for just the item? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I would like to.
And
Okay, then let's go right to item 1, draft solid waste rate study. Scott, I'll turn it over to you first.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to turn this over to Marissa Pareda. She's going to start us off on this item.
Good morning, President and members of the board. It's nice to see everyone again this morning. This item is a review of the district's draft solid waste rate study prepared in response to the upcoming county landfill tipping fee adjustment, which the board approved last night. The district retained MSW consultants in January to evaluate current solid waste rates and develop options to ensure revenues continue to support operations and maintain required reserves. Today, the board is being asked to provide direction on a preferred rate adjustment approach so staff can return in April with a final study and proposed rates. Following the presentation, MSW consultants and district staff will be available to answer any questions. With that, I'll turn it over to David Davis, President of MSW Consultants, to walk you through the study and proposed scenarios.
David, before you take over, this is Mike Schaefer.
Good morning.
Good morning. What is Fireflies that note? Is that?
Oh, that's an automated note taker. I can take that off if you like.
No, that's fine. I just.
Oh, okay.
I'd seen that before, so. Thank you for explaining. It's all yours, but.
All right, thank you. Yeah, it's a really cool tool. It takes notes and really like it. So anyway, good morning, Mr. President, board members. I am David Davis, the president and founder of MSW Consultants. Our firm was retained by the district to perform a solid waste rate study, and this is the initial presentation of our draft results. This presentation is going to be organized into 4 sections. Just want to talk a little bit about the background, probably information that you already know, talk about our methodology and assumptions that went into preparing the study, and then I'm going to present 3 scenarios that have to do with the district's financial outlook. One under the currently approved rate adjustments, and then a couple different scenarios that we did as part of our study. And then finally, we're going to look at your rates compared to those in other jurisdictions. So to start off, just some background. I'm sure you're aware of the WISE agreement because I think you approved it as a previous meeting. So you know that landfill tipping fees in Orange County are going to go from about $44 a ton up to $67 a ton coming this next July 1st. And followed by that, in July of 2027, they're going to go up to $74. And in July of 2028, they're going to go up to $81 a ton. So in a matter of 3 years, you're going from somewhere like $44 to almost double to now you're going to be in the 80s. And then after that $81, it's going to continue on at the CPI. And the table on this chart here shows the current rate adjustment plan for the district. And across the top, it shows the effective date of each of the rate adjustments. And then beneath that, it shows the fiscal year that it's in effect. So for example, the annual service charge that was billed to all your residents in the tax roll, I think probably last December, whenever you get the tax bill, it was effective July 1st, and it was in effect for fiscal 2026, and that's $358.52. So that's the current rate. And then below that, we've simply divided that by 12, so you can compare that to other cities that bill monthly, and that's the $29.88. And then beneath that, you see the annual adjustments. So for example, on July of 2025, it went up 9%. And importantly, under your previous rate plan or your current rate plan, it's scheduled to go up to $383.62 effective July 1st of this year, which is a 7% increase. And another 7% increase after that is approved. And then the final approved rate adjustment under your current plan is a 5% adjustment on July 1st of 2028. And that adjustment will be in effect through fiscal 2029. So what's important here, kind of the takeaway, is that when these rate adjustments were approved in 2023, you did not know that the Orange County landfill system was going to double their rates from $44 to $81. And that's a significant factor, as you know, in the district's cost structure. And also things that you probably already know is that you have a policy of maintaining your operating reserves equal to be 30% of your annual expenditures. Something a little bit different in this study from the last study is on your financial statements, you've got a cash line item on your balance sheet, and you've also got an investments line item. And the investments are highly liquid, and those are things that can be used to pay for operating expenses if they need be. So our approach in this study, after discussion with district staff, was to consider both cash and investments as part of the operating reserve. And I'll show you that in a minute. Also, the agreement requires annual CPI adjustments to the hauler's compensation. And then in your franchise agreement, you're probably aware that there's a net to hauler rate comparison constraint where the haulers agreed to keep their net rates without franchise fees to remain within 10% of the Orange County average. So that's just some of the background that we came to as part of doing this study. Now I'm going to talk about the method that we used. We prepared a multi-year financial rate model in conjunction with district staff. It projects your revenues. It outlines the hauler compensation by line item. So you know there's four parts to that. There's an occupancy charge, and then there's a per ton charge that the hauler receives based on the number of tons of landfill, tons of recycling, and tons of organics. And then in addition to the hauler compensation, the district's operating costs for their staff and the outreach and the regulatory compliance and all the administrative things that they do, those are also part of your solid waste enterprise fund. And then we take a look at those, and we basically take the revenues minus the expenses, and that's what your operating results are. And then we use those operating results to project your cash and investment balances over a 10-year horizon. 10 years was kind of hard to get on a single table in the report. So in your report, it shows the first 5 years in the body of the report. But if you really want to look out to the 10-year projections, those are in the appendix of the report. And when we did these projections, what we did is we took a look at a couple of years of actual operating results. We looked at the budget that the district has. And then we also talked with district staff about, maybe some little different changes in what they expected the budget to be, and then also percentage increases over time. So we had about, I think it was maybe 4 or 5 different meetings with district staff sharing their rate model. We gave them copies of our rate model. So I really feel good about how we worked cooperatively with district staff in coming up with these projections. And along those lines, in the report, you'll find a table that shows the specific projections that are built into the model. We're assuming that inflation is going to be 3%. District salaries are going to go up by that 3% plus another 5% merit adjustment. And then we talked a little bit about this, but the occupancy unit growth rate, we don't see a lot of growth, but there'll be some. So I think we're projecting about 0.25% new occupants in the district over time. So these are the assumptions that the model is based on. So that was part 2. So this is part 3 of the presentation, and there's going to be 3 scenarios here. And each scenario is going to include a table that looks like this, followed by a chart. So let me kind of explain what this table does. It's basically a cash flow statement out over time. So the fiscal years are across the top. So we've got the actual for fiscal 24 and 25, and then we've projected out fiscal 26 through 31. But as I said, in the appendix, you'll be able to see this type of a schedule going out to 2036. And what this shows on the top line is the beginning balance of your cash and investments for each of these fiscal years. So what this shows is that at the beginning of fiscal 2024, which was the end of 2023, you had about almost $4.3 million in cash and investments. And then during 2024, there was a surplus where your revenues exceeded your expenses by about $911,000. And then there were some other changes that happened to your cash balance that are not really related to the surplus and shortfall, but they're things that happen on the balance sheet. So if your receivables change or different things change on your balance sheet, there's going to be other changes to cash that aren't directly attributable to the surplus or shortfall. So at the end of 2024, you had combined cash and investments of about $5.2 million. And then that gets carried forward to the beginning of fiscal 2025. The surplus was not quite as much in 2025, but there were some other significant things on the balance sheet that happened where at the end of 2025, maybe 8 months ago on June 30th, you had combined cash and investments of almost $5.9 million. Now, the next line down here is the target. And what this represents is 30% of your operating costs. And I'll show this to you on a graph in a minute. But what this shows here is that the cash and investments were well over the target balance for each of these 2 years. And they're projected to stay above that target balance for a few more years. Now, what's also important here is that in the year that we're in, we're projecting that the district also realize a surplus of about $421,000. So from the $5.8 million that you had at the end of fiscal 25, the last June 30th, 8 months ago, we think that's going to go up to about $6.3 million by the end of this June. Again, these are projections and they could change, but this is just our current projection. And what's important here is, and this is based on the current rate adjustment plan. So in 2026, this is based on your current rates. In fiscal 2027, this assumes that the rates are going to go up another 7%, like is already approved in the plan. But even if it goes up another 7%, like it's approved in the plan, we're projecting that the district is going to start to incur a shortfall. So its expenses are going to exceed its revenues. So that's going to decrease the cash a little bit. And then as you can see here, the ending cash in 1 year is the beginning cash in the next year. We're projecting that even with the increase that's going to happen or that's going to take effect during 28, you're still going to have a shortfall. And the main reason for this is because these landfill rates are going sky high, right? So you're going from 44 to 67 to 74 to 81. And that's what's really driving these shortfalls. So the good news is that you've got cash and investments to kind of absorb the blow for a few years. But by 2030, you're going to start going below this target, right? So your target by that time is going to be about $3.8 million. but your cash and investments is going to be 2.9. So you're going to fall short of your target in 2030. And then by 2031, we're projecting that you only have about, $89,000 in the bank, which is pretty close to being kind of fully depleted. So let me show you the next slide, and I'll come back to this if you have any questions about it. But what this slide does is try on one visual graph to kind of explain the whole financial outlook of the district. So the green bars represent revenue, the brown bars represent expenses, and the blue line and these points on the blue line represent the district's cash and investments. And what this shows is that, and then the yellow line is your target balance. So the target balance is going to be 30% of this brown line. So as the brown line gets taller, the yellow line grows as well, and it stays at about 30%. And you can see that when you start to incur, so here you had that that surplus that I talked about in 2026, because the green bar is above the brown bar. But you can see in 27, because of these landfill increases, the brown bar is going to start to exceed the green bar, right? And what that's going to do is that's going to make the cash start to go down. And then see how these go. You have a rate increase here, right? The revenue goes up because of the rate increase. It goes up because of the rate increase. But now it kind of levels off. And the revenue levels off, but the expenses keep growing. So that's where you kind of get into trouble here, where you are you fall below your target here, and this represents that $90,000 at the end of that planning period where you're almost out of money. But you can see the trajectory is not good. And in the table that I showed you, that showed you up to this point here. But in the tables in the appendix and in this graph, it shows you all the way out to 2036. So if you don't do anything in the short term, you're going to be okay. But something's got to happen here in the out years to prevent this from happening. And in utility rate making, you're probably aware of this, is that small changes early on can turn into big changes later on. So this was just the financial outlook for the current adjustments. Does anybody have any questions about the format of this? Because I'm going to talk about the two scenarios in a minute. Anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
David, I had two quick questions.
Mm-hmm.
On slide number 6.
Yes.
Is a 3% inflation figure realistic?
Based on the economic forecast that I've seen, because we looked like at the Federal Reserve and different economic agencies that put out inflation, a lot of them are looking at 3%. As you probably know, your guess is as good as mine. If we assumed a higher inflation, I'm afraid we'd get criticized, because people would say, well, look at, you have the Federal Reserve and these other agencies that are projecting a 3% inflation, and you're using 5%. So when you use a higher number like that, you're going to require an even larger rate increase. So you're right that if inflation is significantly greater than what you've got predicted here, you may have to come back in a couple of years and tweak this a little bit. But that's our best guess as far as what inflation is going to be. And I think we can back that up. I can show you some studies that we looked at to come up with that number.
I mean, we're in sort of an anomaly right now with gas prices and things like that. And that's going to figure in somewhere down the line. So 3%, I appreciate what you said about the feds and all that. The other question on that slide that I had, the occupancy unit growth rate. Can you explain what that is a little bit?
Yes. So the district has about 23,000 occupancy units. And I think Costa Mesa is pretty built out. We looked at the historic change. And what this means is that if I take that 23,000 times 0.25, I think you're going to have 57 new units in the district every year for the next 5 years. And that's, go ahead.
Assuming a single family unit?
Yes, or a condo or an ADU, somebody that pays for trash service.
Okay, I just, with the state mandates under the RENA system and all those things that are contributing, they're not building single families anymore, they're building multifamilies. So we just count them each, even though there's 4 units, we count them as one customer or 4 customers, right? Or however many units there are.
Yeah, so I was given a number of units, and I assume most of them are single family units, but I think there may be, if you have a multi-unit complex that has curbside service for some reason, and they're provided service by CR&R, then I think that those units, if they receive curbside collection service, they each and they each pay that fee on the tax roll, then that goes into our unit count. So
Yeah. I'll jump in real quick, David. So yes,
Yeah.
if there's a fourplex, for example, it's under one APN, it'd be on one property tax bill, but it would be billed for 4 units, and that goes into our total count.
Okay.
Each of those units, each ADU would be 1 additional unit.
Yeah, I'm just, I guess I'm too locked into this idea that they're not building no one's building single families.
For the most part, the new service that we're seeing is ADUs that are being added.
The ADUs, yeah. Okay, thanks, David. I appreciate that.
Okay. So now I'm going to run through a couple scenarios using the same format. And they're pretty close to each other, but what this shows is the same table that we showed under the current scenario. But you'll notice here, we still are keeping the 7% for the next 2 fiscal years. So there's no change under the current rate plan as far as the percentage increase. So these two 7% are the same as, so like see this 410.47. Wait, I'm sorry. Oh, I'd have to go to the very beginning. Anyway, that's the same rate that you're going to get. But instead, the thing where it changes is in July of 2028, instead of the 5%, we've assumed that the rates would go up 7%. And then after that, a 10% and 11%. And the thought here is, hey, let's try and just keep to the same current rate adjustment plan as much as possible, and then maybe defer some of these rate adjustments. So the good news on this one is that you don't have to change what you're already planning to do. The bad news is that you have to catch up at the back end to make it work. And let me show you that on the graph. So, oh, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. This is what that looks like. Yeah, so you're still going to incur these losses, right? But it's gonna be not as much. So you're going to incur these losses until you get out here where it kind of levels off. So you're going to stay above the target until you get down here, but you're still going to be incurring these losses. But let me show you what that looks like on the graph over the long term. So basically what you're doing is you're absorbing that landfill increase, and you're using your cash and investments to absorb that increase while you're making the rate adjustments that kind of level off the rate. So by the time you get to 2031, we've got it such that if you keep making increases of about, I think 8 or 9% in the out years, then you can start to just keep your cash balance right at the target. And so you're making surpluses here and keeping your actual cash and investments right at the target. So that's the first scenario. The second scenario is where instead of a 7% here, we're going to go 8%. We're going to increase this by 1% more than it would have otherwise been. Same with the one on July of 27. And just keep them all at 8%. And like I mentioned earlier, in utility rate making, as you know, small changes that earlier make a big difference in the long run. So what this would do to your cash balance is that you'd still incur these losses, but it would generate a little bit more of a surplus here. If you can see, these are higher. They are higher than your target by 600,000, where in the scenario one, it was only higher than by about 85,000. And then on the graph, it looks kind of similar, but it's a little smoother, right? You kind of get to the same place, but instead of a 7% increase early on here, you've got a couple of 8% increases, and then it's 8% increase all the way across the board. So let me just show you what the two rate increases look like. So in scenario one, you keep that 7%, you're right here, right? But then you've got to go up to 10%, 11%, 11%. Now you can kind of, because you've got it up, you can kind of tap on the brakes here a little bit. And that'll keep that line, that cash and investments line, right above the target. With scenario two, you're increasing a little bit more than you otherwise would have had to, and you've still got to bump it up a little bit here in the out years, but it just makes for a smoother rate adjustment plan over time. So just to recap what the two scenarios are, the first one, it maintains your currently approved rate increases in the near term, but you've got to do some higher adjustments later on. And then second one, it just smooths things out a little bit, where higher a little bit in the short term, but not as much in the long term. And before I take questions, I want to just quickly do a couple of slides, because I know you probably have some questions about these scenarios, but I want to just kind of get through everything before we start a conversation. We've got two slides on rate adjustments, and this is part 4 and the last part of the presentation. So the net to hauler comparison is, we don't take necessarily what you charge your residents and divide by 12. What this number is we take what you pay to your hauler and every year, and we divide that by 12. So we use that to compare to rates in other jurisdictions. So we got rates from all the other jurisdictions in Orange County, and we pulled out their franchise fees. So the concept here is that we're looking at, you know, what the district pays its hauler compared to what other jurisdictions pay their hauler. And in your contract, it's called the net to hauler comparison. And there's a provision that says it can't exceed 10% of the net to hauler rates in the rest of the county. So here's the district kind of in the middle. And then we took this blue bar and we put it over here. And then we've got a couple of green bars, and the green bar, this is the average net to hauler rate for all of Orange County. And then we added 10% to it right here. And we said, okay, well, there's 10% of the net to hauler rate for the rest of Orange County. And here's the net to hauler rate of what you pay CR&R. And sure enough, it's lower than 10% than the net to hauler rate. Last slide, it's also a rate comparison, just a little bit different. What this is doing is it's comparing, it's putting franchise fees back into all these rates in Orange County. It's taking the rate that you charge, your annual charge on the tax rolls, dividing that by 12, and comparing that to the rates that customers pay in the rest of Orange County. And what this shows, this is your current rate right here in the middle. And then these two lines here are the different scenarios, right? So scenario 1 is it keeps it a little bit less. Scenario 2 makes it go a little bit higher. And then in developing all these rates for the rest of Orange County, not everybody's gone through this process to incorporate the WISE agreement into their rates. But what we did is we estimated what that would be for all of these cities based on a certain amount of tonnage and that $67 a ton. So I think this is going to be a pretty close comparison when all the rates get finished. But it basically shows that the district is kind of in the middle, but not at the high end, not in the middle, but somewhere in between. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Go.
Hi, David. Thank you. Can you see me? This is Cheyenne.
Yep, I can see. I see a small screen here. So yes.
Okay, great. So just for the sake of public discussion, and we did get a public comment, basically saying, don't raise the rates. And so I just want to say, for the sake of discussion, we have to raise our rates, right? We have no choice. And so, the purpose of this study was to give us our best options, in how to adjust those in light of things we can't change, right? So that's correct. And I think before I get into my questions about the projection methodologies and assumptions, I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly that every single plan involves a shortfall in the future. That's
Yes.
correct.
Yes, it does.
And those are just your projected revenues and projected operating expenses, right?
Yes.
That's all it's working off of.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a little concerning to me that either way, we're going to have to basically supplement the public's expenses by pulling from our investments. Did we explore increasing that, increasing our increases, an additional smaller percentage to at least be breaking even in the future? Because where my mind goes is that we've got some big capital improvement projects in the near future. And I guess I just was assuming we weren't going to be accepting going into the red in the future.
We did look at a scenario where we only used the cash and we left the investments alone. And the rate adjustment was a 16% rate increase in the first year. I can't remember exactly what it was after that, but it was significantly higher than the 7 or the 8% that we're looking at today.
I mean, I guess I'm kind of for our discussion here, I'm a little bit more in favor of the reality that we have to charge the customers what we have to charge in order to sustain a fiscally responsible government body. Like, it doesn't really make sense to me that we're going to approve a plan that we're going to have to supplement the cost to the residents. And percentages sound a lot bigger than the dollar amounts when you split them up on your property tax. Like, we're talking about property owners in the city of Costa Mesa paying a couple $100s a year. When we say percentages, I think they sound more dramatic, but yeah, I'm a little surprised that we're being presented two scenarios that we're going to have to be, coughing up $500,000 in a couple of years.
If I could just jump in to add, we're looking exclusively at the solid waste fund. So we don't have any capital improvement projects for solid waste. Anything for wastewater would be unrelated to what we're looking at here.
Is that divided in half, or is there a larger amount in the wastewater? Is there more in wastewater than there is in trash?
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question again?
Is the money that we have in cash and investments 50-50, or is it larger in trash or in sewage? Because we divided, it's not the same as it, Scott. It's different, isn't it?
Are you talking about investments or are you talking about reserves?
Reserves.
Okay, tell me reserves.
Talking about reserves.
The operating reserve for wastewater is 25%. For solid waste is 30%. And based on this study, as you can see, the cash and investment target, we've been on target. And so I'm not sure if I understand your.
Okay, in our investments in cash, what is our total that we have right now?
Right now, in
25,000 or
25
25?
million?
fund balance right now, we have over 5 million in cash and investment.
Just for solid waste.
That's just solid waste,
Okay.
that's what I'm saying, okay.
Well, I guess philosophically, I thought the cash and investments target was more of like a rainy day fund or to be used for investing into our infrastructure, not to in perpetuity supplement these expenses, our operating expenses to our customers. And that actually brings up a good question. So the surplus shortfall, that only applies to our solid waste fund and expenses. That wouldn't be the entire organization.
No, only solid waste.
Cool.
And
Okay.
under solid waste, because we contract out to CR&R, so we don't have many capital, like we don't have trash truck, so there's no capital.
Yeah, you got to understand, our total budget, 80% of that budget goes to CR&R. 14% of that staff, 6% is M&O. So there's not a lot of meat on that bone. It goes to CR&R.
What was 6%?
M&O, like consultant services, maintaining the building, stuff like that, right? And this board has always taken the position that because we don't have any capital improvements in the solid waste, like we don't have, like Caitlin says, we don't have trucks to replace. Back in 2000, some of you might call back in 2001, we did have carts. We did own the carts, right? And there was some capital expenses to that. We don't own carts anymore, so there's nothing to replace, nothing to solid waste. All we have to pay is for CR&R services, staff, and M&O. And to do that, all we need is 30% of our reserves to pay for those expenses, because majority of our revenue comes from the property taxes, from the assessment rolls. We get a chunk of those revenues 2 times a year, one in the fall and one in the spring. And there's that, what we call the dry period, usually between December through March. We don't have a lot of revenue coming in, primarily just like permitting fees. And so to pay for those expenses, those large expenses like CR&R expenses, which you're paying every month, like, several $100,000 every month, we have to dip into the reserves. And so we need at least $2 million or 30% of that to do that. Now, anything above that is what I call gravy. And that's where we can use that money to help offset any costs. And that's what we've done it historically in the past.
What about when we get to 2031, and we're going to be down in our reserves?
Yeah,
Don't we need that money in the reserves to pay those money?
we would, and then we'd have to do another rate increase. We'd have to do another rate increase because
That's why Cheyenne's saying maybe we should increase the
I
amounts.
that's up to you if you want to increase it.
This is very helpful clarification. And either way, I guess I just still don't understand why we wouldn't just commit to a more responsible, aggressive plan now that isn't putting us at subsidizing the increase in cost to the customers. And I'm really surprised that that's basically what we're being proposed either way.
But I always thought we should hit them hard first, remember, then back off a little bit. That's what we did.
You're the policymakers, if that's what you want.
We
I just want to remind you, it is an election year, so you got to think because of that, yeah, if you want to go higher, that's totally up to you. We just feel because it is an election year, typically elected officials don't like to have high rate increases like that. But again, you're the policymakers. If you want to go 16-20% the first year, let us know.
None of us are really politicians, really.
My
We're
experience
citizens.
My experience with the public is that they have no idea and don't understand the nuance of this situation. And so as the person who will be running for office this year and knocking doors and talking to customers, and we just recently at the city have to deal with a really hard situation with the senior transportation program. We're taking away a free program to hundreds of seniors. It's heartbreaking, but we have to do it because the funding is decreasing. And so I actually feel like as elected officials, we're the ones that have to make these tough decisions that normal people may not understand, because we understand the realities of things that are out of our control. And we have to be responsible with our long-term plan. And what's funny is if we're going to talk about increasing it again down the road, then why not just save our money and not have to hire another consultant in a couple years and just talk about the reality of doing that now. And I mean, we could keep the current next 2 years, but increase that 8% or something like when we start seeing the shortfall, aka 27.
That's why I said decrease the first years.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me also remind you the board that as also, when you have a healthy reserve, a large reserve in the solid waste fund, when we know we don't need that much money, people are going to start questioning us, especially state officials, other officials are going to say, well, why do you have that money? And CSDA has always advocated, if you have a large reserve account, make sure you have a plan to spend that, which we do on the wastewater side. We can easily defend our fund reserves. But if we don't have capital expenses in the solid waste side and we have a $5-6 million fund balance, how do we justify that? What do we explain that to the
Can we
public?
spend it on our education and outreach programs
It's been-
to increase our diversion rates?
That's all.
We're gonna spend $2 million on education? I mean, that's a lot. I mean, I don't think we can. I mean, I don't even know where to spend $2
Think
million.
about pulling anywhere from 200 to 500K for the bills of the customers. So that's what I was, like the amount that we're putting here, that we are comfortable sacrificing.
Well, let me that's why I suggested at the months that we're short funded, if we don't have the money in the account to pay the short funded bills that we have, how are we can do that if we're down to almost nothing?
Well, we don't. We always make sure we have.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Once the money starts coming in, that gets replenished.
I know, but at some point, we're down to almost nothing, aren't we?
So something to clarify, we're not looking at drawing down to zero. We're looking at drawing down to 30%. So we're not dropping below 30%. We're just drawing down to keep us at 30%.
What's that? What is that amount at 30%? Does it say?
So if you look at the slide number, I think 10, like for example, scenario 1, so it shows you what our target is. And then it shows you if like in fiscal year 2031, we're still over the target amount.
Going to be 30% of,
No, that's we're down to there.
yeah, well, we're almost, well, this is.
You know, if I could help a little bit, let me share my screen again.
Almost, like,
Okay, so,
Can't tell.
okay, I understand.
scenario 2 is the most, and then scenario 1 is the closest to the target.
I'm done.
David, you had some comments?
Yeah, I want to just, let's see here. So if we could look at scenario 1, the graph, and then also the table on 10, right? So if you look at 2030, there's a 500, let's use the biggest year, 600,000. In 2029, there's a 646,000 shortfall projected in 29. And then I'm going to look at the graph in 29, and it looks like you've got revenue of about 11 million. Do you see that on the graph? If you look at the green bar for fiscal 2029, it's right there between 12 and 10 million, so they'll call it 11. And if you've got a shortfall of 600,000, so I'm going to take the 600,000 divided by $11 million in revenue, and that's 5.8% that you would have to add onto the existing rate increase. So in 2029, to make that, just trying to give you an order of magnitude. So instead of the 7% in 2029, you'd have to add roughly another 6% to that. So you'd be increasing, you know, the policy could be, so we took it with the policies like, hey, let's keep it at 30%, because that's in the written policy. You've got written policies, and that's one of your written policies. If the policy says, let's always break even, right? Or make a surplus, let's never run a shortfall. Then if that's a policy, then what we would do is we'd take that 7% that's projected for 2029, and this would change all the others. But in that particular year, you'd have to add another 6% to that. So you'd be increasing rates 13% in 2029 in order to not have that shortfall.
David, can you do that same math on scenario 2? Because with scenario 1 being this like variable rate and then picking the lowest month, I think that does feel like the biggest possible jump. But the shortfall, I already was leaning supporting scenario 2 because I think it makes a lot more sense.
Uh-huh.
And the shortfalls are so much smaller. So can we calculate, say, any of these 8% years, how much more the bump would be just to break even? I agree. I don't think we should be, our goal shouldn't be profit right now.
Right, right. Well, and I guess when I say that 6%, that's all in 1 year. So you could graduate up to that 6%. I just want to give you an order of magnitude on what it might be. So, I think that's, when we first did this, we were at 16% in the first year, and that's because we had to get it up to 30% all at once. So I think somewhere between the 8% and the 16%, we could come up with kind of a smoother rate adjustment scenario. And I hate to do it right now in front of everybody because I'm going to guess and it's going to be wrong and people are going to be disappointed. But I guess what I'd like to suggest is we got a model that's pretty slick and it's easy to change these things. But if the direction is, hey, let's not experience those shortfalls, right? Let's at least break even every year. That's a different policy approach or a different, and it's not in your written policies, but we could use that as an assumption, and we could come back to you with some rates that are higher than the 8%, but they wouldn't have to be 16% in the first year. I can't remember exactly what it was in the following years. But if that's the goal, that's something that we could easily, and what we could do is we could keep these scenarios, right? And we could add another scenario 3, right? And the goal in scenario 3 is to break even, right? At least break even, but not lose money, and what would happen is you would stay well above that 30% if that was the case, right? Because here the assumption is we're going to stay above the 30%, even if it means running a shortfall. If the new policy is let's at least break even, then you're going to stay above, you're not going to be right at the 30% line. You're going to be above it, which still fits in with your policy, right? Your policy is not to exactly equal that 30%. Your policy is to stay above that 30%.
So I want to kind of expound for you guys another reason why I'm pushing for this is because if our goal, at least based off of existing projections, is that we'll just break even, then if things like inflation increase 3%, if the occupancy rate increases, which we do have single family housing developments coming that are already approved and in the works that will go into effect before this 5-year term, or if the compensation, the hauler comp adjustment rate increases, then we will be at a shortfall and we know we'd be able to handle it. That's my concern is any additional menial changes in our projections put us further in a shortfall versus entering this a little bit more conservatively, and then we're prepared for deviations.
Yeah, and in fact, if you look at the history, we raised the rates 13%, 13.7%, and that got us well above our 30% needed. So in 2025, we raised it 13.7%. We had the same qualms about the elected should have these qualms, and we didn't hear a word. And the next year it was 9%. And I agree with Cheyenne. I'm not sure we want to just go down to the 30%. I think we need to maintain the reserves something higher than that 30%. We didn't have the same fears, when this board raised those rates and got us substantially above the 30%.
My should then give us what your comfort level, what is above that 30%, because, which is fine. And we can come back to you with like there's a third alternative and see you're comfortable with that. I just want to not warn, but cautious the board that you I wouldn't have a very high fund balance in the solid waste because that's going to attract attention unless we have a plan. If we have a plan how to spend it, then that's one thing. But I don't think we have a plan. I don't think we can have a plan to spend an extra $3 million on what? I don't know.
What was our plan that we chose the 13% in the year 2025, whatever it was?
I think it was to keep the rates after those years lower. That was the plan, I think.
Yeah, I mean, no one likes doing rate increases, right? I mean, we don't like, staff doesn't like it, board doesn't like it, and so we try to lessen the blow to the residents of what kind of increase that's going to be. That's why we have these two scenarios for it because to be lesser blow because of the unfortunate or incident we're dealing with the kind of landfill. I think what Director Wright mentioned is logical because who knows? Because from this Iran war, we could see inflation. We could see it, and that is true. I think that's very plausible. If we want to have a little more than 30%, great, but listen what your comfort level is. I just want to caution the board, just don't have that so high that we can't explain why it's that high.
So the way I'm seeing this is that there's multiple realities, but they don't need to create urgency on each other. So yes, we are above our target. That's amazing. Our costs are increasing. That's terrible. We have to increase our costs. To me, basically in perpetuity, sacrificing our surplus and our target amount is not a great long-term. It's not a great long-term plan to just subsidize these costs to the customers, especially when things could continue increasing beyond our point of control. And separately hearing, yay, we have all this surplus. What do we want to do with it? I propose we have that as a separate conversation.
What are you thinking, Mike?
Oh, I don't mind having a separate conversation on it, but realistically, government agencies use reserves and they use fund balances to compensate for rates. One thing I keep looking at, and I can't erase this from me, I look at the slide 11 of the financial outlook chart for scenario number 1, and I look at number 14 for scenario number 2. Yeah, there are, based on the projections, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years right in the middle where we're going to have expenditures greater than revenues. When I look at the other years, we're substantially higher. To me, it's almost worth biting the bullet over that short term, those 6 years, and I agree with Scott, using the reserves. If we don't use the reserves, and I totally agree with the educational component but we can't buy enough magnets, for example, at $2 million. It doesn't make sense to use reserves for those kind of programs right now, as far as I'm concerned. I don't mind using those reserves to stabilize the income over revenue, or revenue over expenditures. I think that's what reserves should be used for, is to keep the rate solid. As a recent no income person, I'm very concerned about the rates. The 56% we're getting now from the county, that's only going to get bigger. I mean, I'm not going to be making the decisions in 10 years on those rates here. I feel for the people who are going to follow us that have to deal with that. The rates are going to get worse. So to me, you mentioned leaning towards scenario number 2. That's where I was kind of looking at, because I think it's more of a balanced, and I think it's an easier pill to swallow than number 1. So I don't mind taking a look at this stuff, but I'm pretty convinced that an old sports term, we suck it up for 5 or 6 years and use the reserves to keep the rates more stable and less. That's just kind of how I feel.
Probably right,
Nah, I'm not always right.
probably.
I like scenario 2 as well, but I do still have concerns with those initial assumptions. And if that were to deviate, that puts us even further in the red.
Yes. I've thought hard about that.
One of the initial assumptions that I have a question about is, the rate hauler increase is 3% in 27 and then 5%. Is that by contract?
It's because we have the February to February adjust. We know that CPI is 2.9% right now, so we can plug that number in, and then it cannot exceed 5% every year after, so we use the max for every year after. But we know for this year,
We
that
gave them 3% last year.
I think it was, yeah,
Last year,
3.1 or,
right, Caitlin?
yeah.
So by contract, we make the choice of what,
No, by contract, we give them CPI, but it cannot exceed 5%. And
give
so if
them
the
CPI.
actual, yeah, so if the actual CPI is 3%, which we know for this year coming up, it's going to be, then we can plug that number in. But for every year after, we have to assume the max at 5%.
Budgeted that way to keep
oh,
the max in there.
so it's conservative.
But you're happy with
Yeah.
scenario 2?
Yes, scenario 2 is fine, but we could also come back, as Director Wright mentioned, and she is right. We don't have crystal ball. The inflation could be more than 3%. We can come back and give you a scenario 3 of giving us a little more cushion to handle those uncertainties. If you want us to do that, we can do that, bring that back in your April study session.
What's your timetable for getting it finished?
Well, our timetable is, this is great. This is great discussions because we would need some direction from the board. If you want us to come back with a scenario 3, we can bring that back to you at your April meeting, April study session meeting. And then I think it was April board meeting we were going to do.
Yeah, so our timeline is we can come back at the study session in April, and then for the April board meeting, we'd like to have the final study, the rates that you're okay with, so we can set the public hearing and mail out the Prop 218 notice.
Careful how you say rates were okay.
So what's our deadline for we have sent to the county?
We have to send the notice 45 days prior. The Prop 218 notice has to go out 45 days prior to the public hearing, which will be, I believe, June 23rd or 24th. So that April meeting is kind of our
Yeah.
deadline to make sure we have everything set in place so we can get those mailed out.
Is the public hearings in June to make sure we hit the July?
Right, right.
The more information we have, the better decision.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, if you guys are open to it, I think for due diligence purposes, it would be nice to have a third to compare,
Absolutely. I don't,
and make us feel more confident. But I do think we seem to all also find scenario 2 to be the most appealing in light of all things.
David, I appreciate, you've already indicated that you can do that relatively easy for us.
Yes.
And then just to
With-
clarify, are we looking to change the inflation assumption? Are we looking to eliminate any shortfalls from any years? Are we looking to have 32% reserves?
I think
What
the goal is to
exactly?
make sure we're at least break even for the years that show a shortfall. I assumed that was,
Yeah, I think it would, for the sake of consistency, we can keep the existing projections and let's just see what we would need to increase it at simply to break even. And then if we are in the event of a projection deviation, we would know we could handle the shortfall.
in response to our one public comment, I don't think anybody disagrees with the comment. Nobody wants an increase, but go to the gas pump. I mean, it's just part of life right now.
Well, I think the letter that she wrote should go to the Board of Supervisors.
That's right.
I don't think it's the Board of Supervisors as much as it's the OC solid, or what's it called? OC
Waste and recycling.
Waste and Recycling. They're the ones that have caused
I
this.
know, but the
But they report
supervisors
to the Board of
approved it. They
Supervisors.
approved it.
Yeah,
The Board of Supervisors approved these rate increases.
yeah, I get it. Okay.
That's why I asked the question last night. I thought our trash rate would be going down, at the landfill, but it's,
In theory, it should, right? If our costs, if our tonnage, the landfill is going down, then our cost is going down. So in theory, it should, but unfortunately, it's not. And so we need to get to the bottom of that. So to clarify on the directions, we'll come back to the board with scenario 3 on what the rate would be to break even. But if I can also suggest maybe a scenario 4, because I think scenario 3, breaking even, I think it's going to give us a reserve that's quite large, and it's going to create some buzz, the people scrutiny. So maybe bring a scenario 4 where we can make some assumptions. What happens if inflation goes 8%? What would that be? We'll give you another scenario 4 what we won't break even, but again, the deficit or the offset won't be as high as the 8%. If that makes sense. So we'll give you four scenarios.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I think the break-even point should be 10 years out.
Yeah.
Because then we can deal with whatever
Yeah.
the county, and the next time the county screws up.
I think if you see the rate of the break even, I think you'll see the fund balance reserve is going to go up. And again, I think that's going to attract attention to people. So
Well, the break-even reserve is going to keep your fund at about 6 million. So we'll just aim for it to keep it at 6 million, because when you break even, your fund is going to stay the same. And right now it's about 6 million.
At what
Well-
point? At what point are we anticipating that the state is going to start being more forceful or like punitive in their measures with our diversion goals and rates?
It'll be after depending on who gets elected governor. That's what I'm thinking.
usually when we see when the state's having financial troubles, it's when they start eyeing local government budgets. And that's where we try to want to get out of, want to make sure we're not on anyone's radar. I think it was 2008, or maybe we're not even 2011, where the state was having some issues. They were eyeing special district budgets. Why do you have so much money in reserves? What are you spending that for? And CSJ was always telling us, have a plan. You have a plan, then you can shield that kind of discussion.
The grand jury had concerns.
Yes.
A couple of years ago about our reserves.
Yeah.
So if we have $6 million in our solid waste reserves and we have no capital expenses, then how do we justify that?
Yeah, that brings up really good questions for my mind of a separate discussion on ideas and where we would feel comfortable allocating that, short-term or long-term, and goals associated with that. I guess I didn't realize we were saving it for something special.
Director Wilshire, you've been awfully quiet this morning. Any comments or questions?
I'm also concerned about the shortfall, and I think that we absolutely need to have a scenario 3 and potentially a scenario 4 to make sure that those shortfalls are covered. I'm not as educated in finance as Director Wright. I think that she has some great suggestions about potentially using money in reserves for recycling education, since it's it's our biggest priority.
By the way, you're in the majority on that comment about majority of the board being as smart on budgets and stuff.
Well, props to Director Wright. It's clearly her wheelhouse.
I really like your Pearl Jam poster, by the way.
Thank you. My husband's a super fan.
All right. Anything else?
So can I just want to make a suggestion is, what I'm hearing is 2 different scenarios. And what I think might be a good approach is do a scenario where we every year breaks even. So that's going to be a scenario where you're going to still, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you'll have $6 million. And maybe another scenario where it's like, I would say like maybe a Goldilocks scenario, right? Where it's not everybody breaks even, but it doesn't go all the way to 30%. There's somewhere in between. Or would you want to see a surpluses? Which I hear 2 scenarios, and I just like to make sure I get some good direction. And the one I think I'm pretty solid on, right? It's like if we make every year break even, I can come up with a rate adjustment to make that happen. But if that comes like big rate increases, right?
Like your
wow,
first amendment.
would you like to see something in between those two?
Yeah, I think that's resonating with us. So first would be break even, second would be somewhere between scenario 2 and 3, scenario 2.5. To, I think, allow for a concession of like, yes, reserves should go conservatively towards supplementing costs to the public, yet we also want to leave a buffer for education initiatives and supporting other programs that work well for us. But I don't think any of us are interested in a surplus since we are already over our target threshold.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being so helpful. We appreciate it.
No, I appreciate the opportunity.
I just wanted to ask if there were any things with how the material was presented that you would like clarified, because when we come back with the other two scenarios, it'll be presented in the same format. Did you have any questions or clarification on any of that?
I think it was done well.
Okay,
It was done well. We have a
Great.
better understanding.
I'm glad we did this study instead of the other one, which is like 60 pages long. So this was good.
In the study, data was shown that in this present year or before, there was very little tonnage shipped to the landfills. I mean, it was nearly negligible when the trash that we now send to the landfill was run through the MSR at Stanton. Are they still doing that? Do other jurisdictions, is CR&R still running those lines like they had historically?
No, you're talking about the lines where they used to mix waste
They-
and they slid, no, they're not doing that anymore.
They're not doing that for anyone?
No.
Okay, though.
Are they sorting recycling?
we're sorting recycling, but landfill waste, anything collected in the black cart is going
It's
straight,
all going directly to the landfill?
right? It's not being sorted.
Really?
Not being separated.
So any recyclables or commodity stuff
They're lost. Yeah.
they're giving up on? Really? I thought they were still doing that.
No, they don't, they stopped that. Anything in the black can is not, it goes right to the landfill.
I don't know how I missed that. Maybe we need to have a joint session with Orange County Waste and Recycle and us to let them know. And I mean that, I'm saying it flippantly, but I don't mean it flippantly. I mean, who's on that? They're appointed officials, right?
I believe they're elected officials
They're
from
elected
their
officials
agencies
that have
that serve
been
on their
appointed.
board.
They should be on the commission. It's by
That's right,
supervisor.
that's right. It's by super vote, yeah,
It's the integrated waste,
integrated waste management.
yeah. And that's a state law that they have to have that. And I thought there were some penalties for us not to have either the city attend or the sanitary district attend. And that's not happening now.
You don't have anybody
sure.
from Costa Mesa on that right now, I don't believe. Okay. Well, thank you all for a robust presentation, a good presentation. I mean, this is, Scott, did you use the word meat on the bone or something? This is meat on the bone, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to our finance department for getting up early and being with us this morning. We appreciate it. All right, if there's nothing else, any director comments or oral communications? Not, we're adjourned and thank you all.
Thank you, David.